Emotional abuse from women is real, but almost nobody talks about it. And because almost nobody talks about it, that is the reason why a lot of men stay stuck, they stay ashamed, and they stay alone in this. I've been there myself, and so have several of the men that I've worked with over the last few years. So in this video, mate, I'm going to talk about what it is, why it happens, and more importantly, what you can do about it so you make sure this never happens again. So what does emotional abuse look like? To show you, I want to tell you about a former client of mine, Ryan. Ryan reached out to me after his relationship with Christine ended. In the conversation, the way that Ryan described his relationship with her seemed normal to him, but to me, on my side, it showed 4 clear signs of emotional abuse. And the first sign was obvious to me because Ryan said that he felt afraid to stick up for himself. Why is this, I asked. He said, because I knew that whenever I stick up for myself, he said, I will be in the doghouse. She'll give me the silent treatment for days afterwards. He would spiral into confusion, anxiety, fear, guilt. He would constantly, at that point, overanalyze everything that he supposedly did wrong, and it would consume his days. For days afterwards, he would be worrying about this. It would be distracting him from his work even. Now, this wasn't about her taking space, which is very normal. This was actually about her using, sort of weaponizing silence as a form of punishment and control. And she never communicated her intentions about it. She just cut him off with no explanation. That is called stonewalling, and it is one of the most common forms of emotional abuse. But that wasn't the only sign. The second sign is actually something that a lot of men go through, but it's a lot more difficult to get out of it even after you've recognized it. Ryan said to me that the relationship felt addictive. He said the relationship felt like it was a yo-yo, constantly up and down. When I asked him what he meant by that, he said that Christine would go through these cycles of being intensely harsh, judgmental, critical, cold and distant, but then seemingly at random she would suddenly be hyper affectionate, really warm, playful and sexual. And to Ryan, this was intoxicating. Whenever she would come back around after a period of being cold with him, he would feel like he was high off of a drug. And then that cycle would end because she'd suddenly, again, just at random, go cold on him, leaving him feeling confused and abandoned once again. And this is what I call weaponized affection. And it's really dark because it actually hijacks the brain's reward circuits. And that reward circuit is like a system, and it's the same system that makes gambling addictive. It's because inconsistent rewards create that addictive feeling in the brain, not just of humans. They've actually tested this on rats as well. And that is actually why some men stay in a toxically abusive dynamic for a really, really long time. But it wasn't just the highs and the lows that kept Ryan attached. It was actually the guilt. And that brings us to the third sign that I noticed. Christine always found a way to be the powerless one in the dynamic. She was always the victim. Nothing was ever her fault. Every issue somehow became something that Ryan did wrong, or something that Ryan needs to fix in his own mind in therapy or whatever. He was the one who was constantly analysing himself. He was always trying to be a better boyfriend to her, while she basically dodged all responsibility. And this is emotional manipulation disguised as helplessness. And if you're a good man who hates seeing people in pain, then this dynamic, mate, I'm not joking, it can keep you trapped for years. I've met men who have been in a marriage that's basically this for decades. So she had him playing this role, but there was also something else that she was doing that was actively keeping him trapped. Now, Christine, over the course of time of them dating each other, slowly took control of Ryan's life. She took control of his schedule. She took control of his finances. She made it difficult for him to spend time with friends or pursue hobbies outside of the relationship. But the way that she would frame it is that she was doing it to help him in some way. And she was very clever in the way that she would frame it. It seemed very logical, but actually underlying all of it, it was all about cutting off his sense of independence. So Ryan felt, he even used the word emasculated. He says, I feel emasculated in this relationship. I don't feel like the man at all. I don't feel like a man, he said. And by the end, Ryan didn't recognise himself. So that was Ryan's story. Maybe you can relate to Ryan. I sincerely hope not. But if you can relate to Ryan, I want you to know, mate, it's not your fault. You're not weak, you're not a pussy, and you're not a beta. We end up in these emotionally abusive dynamics because of deeper layers of conditioning in the mind that started way before you even met that woman. When you let a woman overstep your boundaries, maybe it's because on some level when you were younger, you learned that your anger was not convenient or a problem. Maybe when you were younger, you weren't encouraged to express your needs, to set boundaries and to say no. Maybe you had emotionally volatile parents. In the same way that you may bend over backwards to control or like try to soothe your partner, maybe this is the same dynamic that you did with your parents when you were a kid. So now confrontation feels unsafe. It triggers deep anxiety in your system. When children feel pain, emotional neglect, or they're not getting their emotional needs met, they blame themselves because a child does not have a bigger picture of the world yet. And in order to cope with the pain, a kid may blame themselves because then that at least gives them a form of control over the situation. But this is a problem because then a kid then starts to think that they are the problem. They might come to believe that they are broken, and that may have been the case for you. So in a sense, you may believe now, as an adult, on a very deep level, that this kind of treatment is all you deserve. Why? Because on some level you might believe, from childhood, that you are broken, and you've always been broken. There's a saying, we accept the love we think we deserve. And maybe, mate, if your parents were distant or neglectful or inconsistent, maybe you learned to manage everyone else's emotions as a way of coping, as a way of surviving. So now you do this in your relationships with women. You take responsibility for their emotions. But the good news is, the path of recovery is available to you. And even better news is, if you walk a path of recovery with this, it will not only lead to fun, fulfilling, passionate, enjoyable relationships, it will also make you a better man, not just in relationships, but in every conceivable area of your life. And there's 3 steps I want you to remember when it comes to overcoming this cycle. Now let's talk about step 1. When your partner, when you're with a woman and she gets angry or she starts criticizing you or whatever, and you freeze up, that's not you being weak, that's a result of anxiety flooding your system. And you can't respond in the moment when your whole system, your whole body is flooded with anxiety. That's why you may freeze up. So if you want to be in healthy relationship with somebody, you have to learn to set boundaries, you have to learn to stick up for yourself, and you can't do that if your nervous system, if your body is so full of anxiety. So what you need to do is you need to start training your body to handle emotional intensity. You need to start practicing what I call emotional self-regulation, which is basically a way of saying staying cool, centered, and grounded when your emotions are intense. Okay? So there's one practice for this. You've probably done this before. There's many different ways of doing this, but I want you to try a practice called Wim Hof breathing. Wim Hof breathing. Any form of breath work really helps, but the more intense the breath work, the better. Let's talk about step number 2. If you struggle to say no, and set boundaries, then you may find yourself dating the wrong woman again, and she will keep pushing against your boundaries until you have nothing left. So what I want you to do, mate, is to set standards and communicate them. So what I want you to do, mate, is I want you to write a list of things that you will never tolerate again in relationships. I'll never tolerate the silent treatment. I will not tolerate being criticized in public. But once you've written your never tolerate list, I'm not going to tolerate this, I also want you to start practicing saying no. Okay? Start saying no in small ways. Keep track of how many times in 1 week that you've said no, and try to increase it. The more no's that you say, I promise you, not only will your relationships get better, so will your social life with your friends, and so will your life as a whole. And the 3rd step is all about your relationship with yourself, mate. So one of the things that I've seen across all these different men that I've worked with is a tendency to do something called self-betrayal, which means they basically don't do what they say they're going to do with themselves. And what this does, this erodes self-trust in the long term. Okay, so one thing I want you to remember, I want you to keep doing, is to rebuild the trust in yourself that you may have lost by keeping your promises to yourself. That's how real confidence is built. It's when you stop performing and you start building that deep sense of self-trust and self-connection, so that you won't self-betray when you're in a relationship with a woman. If this message hit home and you want to be in a healthy, loving relationship with a woman one day, then click the link in the pinned comment down below, find out all about the kind of work I do with men, see if it's right for you, and book a free 30-minute call with me, and we can discuss your situation and what steps you need to take to move on from it. I'll see you in the next video, mate. Stay courageous.